Hey guys, Miss White here again from Michigan. Today we are going to talk about the domino theory in the Cold War. This video in particular will talk about China. All right, so without further ado, let's get to getting on the good stuff, shall we? All right, so we're focusing on the time frame. Well, I guess for China, this is the late 1940s through the 60s. We'll say that. That sounds good. All right, so really quickly, remember domino theory. It was one of your vocab words for Unit 8. If you did look at that, good for you. If not, it's a vocab word. So domino theory just means if one country falls to communism, that means neighboring countries will follow. Similar to that gift that everyone loves where the dominoes change numbers, right? One falls and everyone else falls in succession. All right, so Russia turned communist. It turned into the Soviet Union or the USSR by 1922 by Vlad Lenin. It was only a matter of time before other countries around it fell to communism. Once World War II was done and out of the way, because that obviously took a lot of focus from people, now it was time for the superpowers of the world, the United States and the Soviet Union, to spread their influences worldwide. All right, the very first victim, I'll say victim, was China. All right. So again, we all know what happened in China prior to World War II. I'll remind you here in just a second. There was a civil war in China right after World War I, 1945, and it ended in 1949. It was the communists versus the nationalists. Remember, a nationalist is someone who has extreme pride in their country. Imagine these nationalists like conservatives. They wanted to conserve China to its former glory. When I say former glory, China used to conquer the entire world back a few hundred years ago. They were unstoppable. The European powers respected them for a little bit. Again, I'll get to that in just a second. Right? And then the communists wanted drastic change. Overthrow the government and establish something completely new because obviously the old way of thought was not working. Okay? That's the Civil War. The communists had this idea. There was a century of humiliation for China that led to bad feelings for the people of China. 100 years of humiliation. So I'm talking, this started in 1945. 100 years before that, 1845. If you guys remember, and if you don't, that's totes okay. We had the Opium Wars. Remember, England was illegally selling opium to China, right? Getting them hooked on opioids, which is a main ingredient in heroin. So it's super addictive. It completely hurt the population of China. But Britain did it to make a quick buck. Money. Right? We also had the Boxer Rebellion. Remember, people of China tried overthrowing the government. Didn't work. Got squashed because some guy thought he was God. Anyway, and then of course we have the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in the 1930s with horrific acts committed, war crimes committed, right? They basically had concentration camps in China. We had the rape of Nanking. It was terrible. So people in China, this was a century of humiliation. That's not China, right? Again, China used to conquer the world. And then for the past 100 years, they were basically the doormat. People were walking all over them, right? So something needed to be done. And that's why the Civil War happened in China. As an end result, the communists won, and China was officially declared a communist state, which it is still technically considered a communist state to this day. It is now officially called the People's Republic of China, or PRC, as you will see it all throughout these slides about China. And it was founded by a guy named Mao Zedong. All right. So anyway, here's a map. You can see gradually, this is communist progression throughout the country of China, right? If you notice, right above China is the Soviet Union. Domino effect. One falls to communism, the countries around it will follow suit. China literally shares a border with Russia, right? So anyway, that's the progression. There's their flag for you for reference too. Really quick about Mao, as you guys will some of you will research him later. All right. Mao was the communist leader of China for a whole lot of years, 1943 to 1976. He solidified complete control. He became basically a dictator. When I say basically, I mean he definitely was a dictator of China, and he did this through horrible, horrible, horrible events. All right. First one that we'll talk about real quick is the Great Leap Forward program of 1958. He tried to rapidly industrialize the Chinese economy. Now, this was successful. If you know anything about anything, you know China's economy is competing against us, right, for global domination. Almost everything that you and I use every single day comes from China, right? He made their economy industrialized, and he made their economy a force to be reckoned with. However, I am not glorifying Chairman Mao at all, because in order to do this, he caused the deaths between 18 and 45 million Chinese citizens. Just with that alone. It was the worst famine in human history. If you remember, again, if you don't, I'll refresh your memory, Stalin also had a 5-year plan when he became dictator of the Soviet Union in the 1920s and 30s. In the 5-year plan, he wanted to rapidly industrialize Russia's economy. Successful, but at what cost? If you think about countries like the United States, England, we industrialized over the course of like 200 years, okay? Very gradual. As we were going slowly but surely, we were figuring out what works, what doesn't work, the flaws, how to fix those flaws, right? And how to move forward progressively so that everyone can benefit from it. Mao in China, just like Stalin in the Soviet Union, wanted it done in like 5 years. That's a short amount of time to fit a whole lot of stuff in. And unfortunately, with Mao being a ruthless dictator, millions of people died. He worked them to death. Okay. Over farming the fields caused famine, right? So a lot of people died. Millions of people died. Then, a few years later, in 1966, we have something called the Cultural Revolution. Remember, communism is all about revolutions, overthrowing the old and establishing something completely new and radical. The Cultural Revolution did exactly that. And they destroyed a lot of ancient cultural artifacts in China, okay? A lot of ancient things that are so wonderful and are at the heart of Chinese culture, all right? Destroyed, okay? Chairman Mao basically wanted to say anything before 1949, before communism was officially established, doesn't matter. That old way of thinking didn't work. Time to look at the future and what's ahead of us. However, anyone who supported the old ways and were against the Cultural Revolution were killed, and this caused another 20 million deaths or so. Okay, the gaps in these death counts are, of course, drastic because communism, they tried, just like with the Soviet Union and the Iron Curtain, they tried to hide it. Okay, we didn't really kill that many people. Like, what are you talking about? Where'd you get that information? That's crazy. Chairman Mao is known as one of the worst dictators in human history, and in my opinion, he is the worst. All right. I talk about Stalin killing millions of people in Russia, and that was terrible, and I'm not saying anything against that. But in my personal opinion, Chairman Mao is the worst leader in all of human history. He was absolutely terrible, and he will make it on the top 10 list of almost any list you Google for worst leaders of all time. There's Chairman Mao pictured there on the left. If you want to send over any funny memes or comments about his receding hairline, go for it. I don't mind insulting someone who was as crappy as Chairman Mao. And there's his portrait hanging up in Tiananmen Square in China, which is in Beijing, the now capital of China. All right, the effects of this, all right, Russia became communist in 1922. By 1949, China was communist. Two massive countries, landmass-wise. If you've ever looked at a map accidentally, you will know that, all right? China became a massive threat now to Asia and the rest of the world because of sheer size, and they also have, they did back then and especially now, a ginormous population, all right? So that's scary to countries like the United States because, okay, Russia, yeah, land mass-wise, they're pretty huge, but only like 2/3 of Russia is actually inhabited by humans. So whatever. But then China comes into play and we're like, crap, this is huge. Okay, so now the United States was officially scared of who else is going to fall to communism now because China did, and it looked horrific, all right? So it caused a red scare everywhere else. Here's a fun GIF for you as well, just kind of showing you, yikes, the growth of communism throughout time, right? I encourage you to look at this GIF a little bit more, but that is your video on China, all right? Stay tuned for more information.